The black car moved slowly through the streets of Seoul, and inside it, Kang Tae-hyun held a small velvet box, like it was a stone tied around his neck. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. He already knew what was inside. A diamond ring that had cost more than most people's houses, chosen by his mother's jeweler, approved by his mother's taste, meant for a woman his mother had chosen. "Sir, both families are already at the rooftop," his assistant said gently from the front seat. "Ms. Han's parents arrived 20 minutes ago. The press has been briefed. Quietly, of course." Tae-hyun said nothing. Tonight he was supposed to get down on one knee in front of two of Korea's most powerful families and ask Han Seo-yeon to marry him. It would be filmed. It would be photographed. It would be printed in the business section before it was ever printed in anyone's heart. He stared at the box in his palm and felt nothing. Then, for just a second, an old memory slid into his mind uninvited. Another woman's hand, another ring. Simpler, cheaper, worn on a finger that used to reach for his in the dark. Elena. He shut the box. "She's gone," he told himself. "Tonight I move forward." The car slowed at a red light. Out of habit more than curiosity, Tae-hyun turned his head toward the window and froze. Across the street, a woman stood at the crosswalk. Black, tall, poised in a way that made the whole sidewalk seem to organize itself around her. For one heartbeat, Tae-hyun told himself his mind was inventing ghosts. Then she turned her face toward the light. It was her. Elena. Alive. In Seoul. After 3 years of silence so complete, he had convinced himself she had simply stopped existing somewhere out there in the world, untouched by him, unbothered by him. He couldn't breathe. She was not alone. A small boy stood beside her, one hand wrapped around two of her fingers, the other clutching a little toy car against his chest. The boy turned his face toward the road. Tae-hyun's blood went cold. The eyes, the eyebrows, even the serious little furrow in the boy's forehead. Tae-hyun had seen that exact expression in his own baby pictures 1,000 times, buried in an album his mother kept locked in a drawer. The light changed. The car began to roll forward. "Stop the car!" Tae-hyun shouted, already reaching for the door. "Sir?" He didn't wait for an answer. He threw the door open and stepped out into moving traffic, horns screaming around him, and he heard none of it. He saw only Elena and the boy. Elena looked up. Their eyes met across the street. All the color drained from her face. She grabbed the boy's hand and turned, walking fast, then faster. "Elena!" Tae-hyun called out, running now, weaving between cars, ignoring the shouts of drivers he nearly collided with. "Elena, wait!" She didn't stop. She pulled the boy along, and in the rush the child stumbled, dropping his toy car onto the pavement. Tae-hyun scooped it up without thinking. When he looked up again, Elena and the boy were already climbing into a taxi at the corner. He stood there, chest heaving, holding a small plastic toy car in his hand, like it was the only solid thing left in the world. Then he noticed something. A small sticker on the underside of the toy, half peeled, a name written on it in a child's careful handwriting, clearly guided by an adult's hand. Kang Ji-ho. Kang, his family name. Tae-hyun's assistant finally caught up to him, breathless. "Sir, the restaurant is calling. Ms. Han is asking where you are. We have 15 minutes. Tae-hyun wasn't listening. He was staring at the taxi disappearing into the flow of traffic. He looked down at the ring box in his other hand, then at the toy car in his palm. He handed the toy to his assistant. "Find out where that taxi went." "Sir?" "Now." The assistant, stunned, backed away to make the call. Tae-hyun got back into his car. The driver waited for instructions to the restaurant. "Follow her," Tae-hyun said instead. Across the city, on a rooftop strung with warm lights and white flowers, Han Seo-yeon sat at a beautifully set table, smiling for photographs, waiting for a man who was no longer coming. 3 years earlier, Tae-hyun had been a different man, or maybe the same man, who simply hadn't yet been tested. He met Elena during an international development project that had brought her to Seoul. She was sharp, funny, and completely unimpressed by his wealth, which was, he later realized, exactly why he fell for her. She didn't flatter him. She challenged him. She made his enormous, cold mansion feel, for the first time, like somewhere a person could actually live. Against his mother's wishes, he married her. For a while, they were happy. Genuinely, foolishly happy. The kind of happy that made board meetings feel like distractions from real life. But Chairwoman Kang Mi-suk never accepted Elena. Not for a single day. She believed her son belonged to a Korean family of equal standing, not to a foreign woman with no fortune and no bloodline to offer the Kang name. Then one night, everything collapsed. Confidential company documents were leaked to a rival firm. Millions were lost overnight, and every thread of evidence pointed to one person, Elena. Emails from her account. A money transfer into an account linked to her name. Security footage that appeared to show her slipping into Tae-hyun's private office late at night, when she had told him she was out with a friend. "I didn't do this," Elena said, again and again, her voice breaking each time she said it. "Tae-hyun, look at me. I didn't do this." "The evidence. Forget the evidence for 1 second," she said, gripping his arms, forcing him to look at her face instead of the folder of documents on his desk. "Look at me. Do you truly believe I would destroy you?" Tae-hyun opened his mouth. Nothing came out. His silence was the answer, and it broke her more completely than any accusation could have. "If you walk out that door," he finally said, his voice hard, protecting something inside himself he didn't want to examine, "never come back." Elena looked at him through tears for a long moment. Then, slowly, she slid her wedding ring off her finger and set it gently on the table between them, like she was setting down something too heavy to carry any farther. She turned and walked out. What Tae-hyun never knew, what he could never have known, because he never asked, never looked past his own wounded pride, was that Elena had discovered she was pregnant only days before. She had been planning to tell him that very week. Instead, she left Seoul carrying his unborn child, and carrying a silence that would cost them both 3 years. Back in the present, it didn't take long for Tae-hyun's people to trace the taxi to a modest apartment building on the edge of the city, a world away from the marble and glass Elena had once lived in as his wife. He told his driver to wait, and he stood outside in the evening air until Elena came walking back from what looked like a clinic, Jiho's small hand in hers. She saw him before she reached the door. She stopped cold. Jiho, sensing the tension in his mother's grip, ducked halfway behind her leg. Tae-hyun stepped forward, his voice unsteady in a way it never was in boardrooms. "How old is he?" "Leave, Tae-hyun." "How old is he, Elena?" She said nothing. Her jaw tightened. He held up the toy car, the one he'd carried in his pocket since the street. He turned it over and pointed to the small handwritten sticker underneath. "Kang Jiho," he read aloud, his voice cracking on the family name. Elena's face changed, the fear giving way to something rawer, more exposed. "Is he my son?" Tae-hyun asked. The words came out barely above a whisper, like he was afraid of what they might do once released into the air. Elena said nothing, but her silence told him everything he needed to know. He looked down at the boy again, 3 years old. He did the math in his head, counting backward, and watched the number land exactly where he feared it would. "You were pregnant," he said. "When you left, you were pregnant." "Yes," Elena finally said, her voice flat, guarded, like the word cost her something to give him. Tae-hyun took a step back as if she had struck him. For 3 years he had believed he'd lost a wife who betrayed him. Now he understood he had also lost the first 3 years of his son's entire life. The first steps, the first words, the first laugh. All of it gone, spent by a stranger's version of himself who never even knew to grieve it. Don't, Elena snapped before he could say another word. Don't you dare stand there and act like I stole him from you. Elena, I tried to tell you. Her voice shook now, 3 years of buried anger finally breaking the surface. After I left, I found out I was pregnant. And even after everything, even after you told me never to come back, I thought you deserved to know. Then why didn't I? I called you. Your number was blocked. I sent emails. They never reached you. I wrote a letter, Tae-hyun, and I went to your family's house myself to deliver it. Tae-hyun's stomach turned. You went to the mansion? You were away on business. Your mother met me instead. Something cold settled behind Tae-hyun's ribs. What did she say to you? Elena's eyes glistened, but her voice stayed steady, controlled, like she had rehearsed this story in her head 1,000 nights and refused to let it break her now. She already knew I was pregnant. She told me you wanted nothing to do with me. And then she told me that if I ever came back, the Kang family had the power to take my son away from me, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. My mother would never— She would, Elena said, cutting him off, her voice rising. She did. I had no money, no family here, no power, and I had just watched fake evidence destroy my entire marriage in a single week. So yes, Tae-hyun, I believed the threat. I left the country with your son inside me, and I never looked back. Tae-hyun stood there, stunned into silence. Elena let out a short, bitter laugh, more painful than any scream could have been. And even now, she said, even after everything, your first instinct is still to defend her instead of believing me. This is exactly why I left Tae-hyun. Her voice cracked at last. Because every single time I tell you the truth, you need someone else to confirm it, before you'll believe me. She turned, scooping Jiho up into her arms, and walked into the building without looking back. Tae-hyun stood alone on the sidewalk in the dark, her words echoing louder in his chest than any boardroom verdict ever had. Across the city, Han Seo-yeon was done waiting. She found Tae-hyun that night at his office, jacket still rumpled from the street, tie loosened, looking nothing like the composed man who had left the house that morning. Do you understand what tonight cost me? She said, arms crossed. Both families sat there for 2 hours. There are already rumors online. My father had to go up there and make excuses for you. I saw Elena, Tae-hyun said quietly. Seo-yeon's expression flickered, just barely, just enough. Your ex-wife, the one who disappeared? She has a son, 3 years old. He looked directly at her. He's mine. For one unguarded second, something passed behind Seo-yeon's eyes. Not shock, but recognition. The look of someone hearing a secret confirmed rather than revealed. Then she smoothed it away, quick and practiced. You don't know that, she said. Not for certain. I know, Tae-hyun said. What if, Seo-yeon said carefully, stepping closer. She found out you were about to be engaged, and suddenly reappeared with a convenient little boy, who happens to have Kang features. Have you considered that, Tae-hyun? She didn't come to me, he said. She ran from me. I chased her. Seo-yeon's jaw tightened, but she said nothing more. That night, Tae-hyun went straight to his mother's house. Chairwoman Kang Mi-suk was seated in her study when he entered without knocking, something he had never done in his adult life. Did Elena come to this house 3 years ago? He demanded. Of course not, his mother said smoothly, not even looking up from her tea. Why would she? Did you know she was pregnant? For exactly 1 second, one single unguarded second, his mother hesitated before answering. No, she said finally. I didn't. But Tae-hyun had spent his entire life reading hesitation across boardroom tables. He recognized a lie when it wore his mother's face. He said nothing more that night. But for the first time in his life, Kang Tae-hyun began quietly investigating his own family. He went back to Elena's apartment the next evening, alone this time. No bodyguards, no lawyers, No leverage. Just a man standing at a door he had no right to knock on. "I won't force you to do anything," he said when she opened it. "I'm only asking for 1 hour with him." Elena hesitated, arms crossed tightly over her chest. But behind her, Ji-ho peeked around the doorframe, recognizing the tall stranger who had once returned his toy car. "Mommy," the boy said, tugging her sleeve. "Is he your friend?" Elena's breath caught. She didn't answer. Eventually, reluctantly, she stepped aside and let Tae-hyun in, staying close enough to intervene at any moment. The hour was awkward at first. Tae-hyun could negotiate billion-dollar mergers without blinking, but he had no idea how to sit on a small rug and talk to a 3-year-old. Then, Ji-ho dragged out a small box of toy cars and lined them up proudly on the floor. Tae-hyun found himself smiling despite everything. He'd loved toy cars exactly like these as a child. At lunch, Ji-ho pushed his carrots to the very edge of his plate with fierce determination. Tae-hyun stared. He'd hated carrots at that age, too. When Elena gently scolded him for not eating them, Ji-ho crossed his little arms and pouted, the exact same stubborn gesture Tae-hyun made whenever a business deal didn't go his way. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Tae-hyun laughed, really laughed, from somewhere deep in his chest. Elena watched from across the room, silent, her arms still crossed, but something in her face had softened just slightly. Later, worn out from playing, Ji-ho climbed into Tae-hyun's lap and fell asleep against his chest, without warning, without hesitation, the way only a child can trust a stranger. Tae-hyun went completely still, afraid to breathe, afraid to move, afraid to break whatever fragile thing was happening in his arms. "I missed all of this," he whispered, looking at Elena. "So did he," she answered quietly. The words landed harder than anything she could have shouted at him. Over the following days, Tae-hyun learned the real reason Elena had returned to Seoul. Ji-ho had a medical condition, not immediately life-threatening, but serious enough to require a specialist and a careful course of treatment. Elena had researched everywhere, and Seoul offered him the best chance. She had planned to slip in quietly, get him treated, and disappear again before anyone noticed. She had never planned to see Tae-hyun at all. He immediately offered to pay for everything, the best doctors, the best hospital, whatever Ji-ho needed. Elena refused, sharp and immediate. "I don't want your money." "Elena, let me help." "I needed a husband 3 years ago," she said, her voice tight. "I needed someone who believed me when it mattered. Money can't replace that, Tae-hyun. It never could." He had no answer for that. He simply nodded, and quietly, without telling her directly, began using his influence behind the scenes to make sure Ji-ho received the very best care, careful never to take control away from Elena, never to make her feel managed or owned again. Meanwhile, across the city, Seo-yeon's calm was cracking. She met secretly with Chairwoman Kang in a private tea room, both women's faces tense. "If that boy is proven to be his son," Seo-yeon said quietly, "the engagement is finished. Everything we built collapses." "It won't come to that," Chairwoman Kang said coldly. "We got rid of her once," Seo-yeon said, her voice low and certain. "We can do it again." Within days, fake evidence began circulating. Photographs of Elena standing close to another man overseas, documents suggesting he had lived with her around the time Ji-ho was born. An anonymous message reached Tae-hyun's phone, planting a single poisonous question. "Are you certain the child is even yours?" Seo-yeon found him staring at his phone that evening, and she leaned in gently, her voice soft and reasonable. "Demand a DNA test, Tae-hyun, before you throw everything away for a woman who vanished for 3 years." When Elena found out what was happening, what was being said, what was being shown to him, she was devastated in a way that went beyond anger, straight into exhaustion. "Here we are again," she said quietly when Tae-hyun came to her, papers in hand. She didn't even look surprised anymore. That was the worst part. Say it, Taehyun. Ask me for the test. Get it over with. She began quietly preparing to leave Seoul the moment Jiho's treatment was finished, unwilling to fight the same battle twice. Taehyun stood there, holding the exact same choice he'd faced 3 years earlier. Evidence in one hand, Elena in the other. This time, he tore the documents in half. 3 years ago, he said, his voice raw, I believed everyone except my own wife. I lost you because of it. I am not making that mistake again. Elena stared at him, stunned into silence. I don't need a test to decide whether I protect my son, he said. Or you. His people worked through the night, and the truth surfaced fast. The man in the photographs was Elena's cousin, nothing more. The documents had been digitally altered, and buried in the file's metadata was the exact same digital signature used to fabricate the evidence that destroyed their marriage 3 years earlier. Someone had framed Elena once, and that same someone had just tried to do it again. This time, Taehyun knew exactly where the trail led. Chairwoman Kang insisted Taehyun attend the rescheduled engagement celebration, threatening to strip him of his position at the company if he refused. Seo-yeon stood beside him that night in front of both families, executives, investors, and cameras, glowing with the certainty that he had finally chosen the empire over the woman. Instead, Taehyun walked onto the small stage alone. He didn't announce an engagement. He told the truth. He laid out the fabricated evidence from 3 years ago, the blocked calls, the intercepted emails, the threats made against a pregnant woman with nowhere to turn. Then he laid out the second attempt, the fake photographs, the falsified documents, the matching digital signature that tied both frame jobs to the same source. The room went utterly silent. Seo-yeon's face drained of color as every eye in the room slowly turned toward her. Stop this immediately, Chairwoman Kang commanded from her seat, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. No, Taehyun said. His mother rose to her feet, delivering her ultimatum in front of everyone who mattered to the Kang name. If you walk away from this engagement, if you choose that woman and that child, you lose your position as CEO, effective immediately. The room held its breath. 3 years ago, Taehyun had chosen the company, and it had cost him everything that actually mattered. This time, he reached up, unclipped the CEO badge from his jacket, and set it gently on the table in front of him. 3 years ago, he said, his voice steady now, carrying across the silent room. I chose this company, and I lost my family because of it. I will not make the same mistake twice. He turned and walked out, past his mother, past Seo-yeon, past every investor whose opinion had once mattered more to him than his own wife's tears. For the first time in his life, Kang Taehyun chose love over power, in front of the exact people who had taught him never to. He found Elena that same night, breathless from the drive, still in the suit he'd worn to expose his own family in public. She didn't run to him. She didn't cry with relief. She simply looked at him, tired in a way that went bone deep. Exposing the truth tonight doesn't erase 3 years, Taehyun, she said quietly. I know, he answered. He didn't beg her to remarry him that night. He didn't offer her a mansion or a title or anything that could be bought. He only asked for one thing. Let me be his father. That's all I'm asking. Over the months that followed, Taehyun proved himself in ways no contract or apology ever could. He sat through every hospital appointment, memorizing test results the way he once memorized quarterly earnings. He learned exactly how Jiho liked his eggs in the morning, and exactly which stuffed animal had to be tucked in first at night. He read bedtime stories badly, mixing up character voices until Jiho giggled and corrected him. He missed important board meetings for school pickups, and small moments that would have meant nothing to the old Taehyun, and meant everything to the man he was becoming. Slowly, carefully, Jiho began to trust him. Then one night, the boy woke from a nightmare, crying out in the dark. Taehyun ran into the room before Elena even reached the hallway. Ji-ho reached both arms up toward him and sobbed. "Appa!" Tae-hyun froze completely. It was the first time his son had ever called him father. He gathered the boy into his arms and held him, unable to speak, his own eyes burning. In the doorway, Elena stood watching, tears sliding silently down her face. For the first time in 3 long years, the wall around her heart began, quietly, to crack. Months later, Tae-hyun brought Elena and Ji-ho to the small, quiet place where they had first fallen in love, years before any of this began. Elena assumed it was nothing more than a family outing. "The last time I asked you to trust me," Tae-hyun said, standing before her. "I hadn't earned it." Elena looked at him, waiting. "So, I won't ask you to forget what I did," he continued, his voice unsteady now. "I'll only ask for the chance to spend the rest of my life proving that I learned from it." Before he could say another word, Ji-ho came running toward them, giggling, holding up a small velvet box with both hands like it was the most important delivery in the world. Tae-hyun's eyes went wide. "Appa said this is for Mommy," Ji-ho shouted proudly. Elena burst into laughter through her tears, one hand pressed over her mouth. Tae-hyun looked mortified, his carefully planned proposal completely ruined by an overeager 3-year-old. But this time, he didn't care at all. He got down on one knee, not as a billionaire, not as a CEO, not as a man used to getting everything he wanted the moment he wanted it. He knelt there simply as the man who had once lost everything because he failed to trust the woman he loved, and who had been given, against all odds, a second chance to do it right. Elena looked down at Ji-ho, bouncing excitedly beside them. Then she looked at Tae-hyun, kneeling in the dirt in an expensive suit, ring box shaking slightly in his hand. She didn't answer right away. Tae-hyun waited, his heart pounding louder than it ever had in any boardroom. Finally, Elena reached down and took his hand. "This time, Tae-hyun," she said softly, "we do it differently." He nodded, pulling her hand to his lips. "This time, I listen." Ji-ho threw his small arms around both of them at once, laughing, and the 3 of them stood together in the fading light, the family Tae-hyun never knew he had, finally, after everything, walking home together. Sometimes the greatest betrayal isn't the lie someone tells about the person you love. It's choosing to believe that lie instead of giving them the trust they deserved. Kang Tae-hyun could never get back the 3 years he lost. But when life gave him the same choice a second time, he finally chose differently. If this story moved you, don't scroll past without hitting that like button. It genuinely helps this channel grow. Drop a comment below and tell us what part hit you hardest. Was it the toy car with his son's name, or the moment Ji-ho called him Appa for the first time? And if you want more emotional stories just like this one, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. Thank you for watching until the very end. We'll see you in the next story.